With the release of Make Your Mark, many people in the fandom, even those who once defended G5, are now turning their backs on it. Not just for failing on its own narrative, but for its destruction of the legacy Friendship is Magic made. All for the sake of squeezing a little more money out of the fandom. But are we calling things too early? Is it possible that the movie and the first episode are just a fluke, and G5 will actually have something planned that the entire fandom can get behind? Today we are taking a deep dive, and I mean deep, into not just the G5 film and Make Your Mark special, but we are going to be looking at the comics, creator interviews, and established plans for the future of the show, all in search of the answer to one massive, lingering question: is there any hope for MLP G5, or is it simply doomed to fail? Let's start from the beginning, and I mean the very beginning, as in the very concept of a 5th generation in the first place. The reason for this is because G5 is of course a sequel to G4, so we need to determine if a sequel for this show would work in the first place. A reboot is simple because you are creating a whole new world with new rules and a new cast of characters. Sequels, on the other hand, have to maintain continuity and pick up where the previous series left off. The problem with this is that the show is finished. It's the end. It wasn't meant to go on any further. It was meant to have a satisfying closing. If they are to make a sequel series, it is best if it takes place in the far future with a new cast of characters. This is where G5 got things right. The story of the previous characters is closed, and reopening it would come off as a cash grab. But it doesn't seem like Hasbro is quite done with these characters. It's one thing to reference back to them, maybe give us some small glances into what things were like after Twilight became the ruler of Equestria, but it seems like they plan on taking things much further, and are actually bringing back old characters to add on to their story. The G5 comics have shown images of characters such as Discord and Twilight, and there was a plushie with a description mentioning King Sombra. It is unclear if that last one is legit though, or if it was written by a marketer who didn't know any better and just googled MLP villain. Now, bringing back old characters is possible, but tricky. They really just need to make sure that they don't devalue or undermine their characters and maintain continuity. Speaking of continuity, let's talk about world building, because I haven't complained about that before. Consistency is important in a story because it helps to maintain the illusion of reality. If there is an inconsistency, be it in a character's personality, the world building, etc., suddenly the feeling that what we are seeing is real is weakened, and we as the viewer become less invested. And G5 is chock full of continuity errors. Whether we are talking about unicorns not needing to study to use magic, the day and night cycle operating on their own, or just about a million things on how cutie marks work. The list goes on much further, but given that there are this many in a single movie and a 45-minute special alone, and they haven't done anything to address even one of these inconsistencies, I am willing to bet they don't plan on addressing them at all. So this all tells us that the concept for G5 being a sequel series can in fact work, but it has to be handled correctly. And so far, we haven't gotten that. But keep in mind, this is all still the beginning, and there is still a small chance that they have everything worked out in later episodes. But to know whether or not they plan to fix these errors, we would need to know what is going through the show creators' minds. Well, conveniently, we don't have to speculate, because the creators outright tell us what their creation process was. The director of the movie, Jose Luizuka, even went as far as to answer many of the questions people have been asking. In an interview, Jose mentioned several pretty concerning things that indicate that they do not intend to fix these errors because they have no plan. Jose stated, 1, that they did not run off a concrete reason for the 3 pony races originally splitting, but it could be explored in the series, which he is not a part of. And 2, they wanted G4 locations to be far in the past so that they could completely reboot the world and start new. This includes the main 6, who they did not come up with a fate for. Now, you would think that maybe, just maybe, these would be pretty important things to plan out when writing the movie, especially because when they show the stained glass window, constantly reference G4, and tell us that the Unity crystals had something to do with the division, they would be suggesting they have a plan. No, he is literally saying that they are not going to come up with an explanation, but instead hope that the people working on the series can come up with something cohesive. This is way too big a point to just leave unanswered. This was the same problem the Star Wars sequel trilogy had. J.J. Abrams wrote The Force Awakens in the future, and introduced us to about a million questions to get us all theorizing and engaged, only to not actually have a plan to answer any of them. If you want more similarities, they switched directors between movies as well, and they both had very different visions in mind for the trilogy, leading to a jumbled mess of side plots that went nowhere, characters that do nothing, and of course, endless plot holes. But you know what? Points to Jose for at least being honest about not having a plan. Still not a smart move, but at least he's not being a jerk about it, unlike the Star Wars writers who actually say their critics are all sexist for not wanting a female lead character. Never mind the fact that everyone loves Ahsoka. Forgive me for getting off track. I really don't like the sequel trilogy. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, Interview. Basically, planning is important if you want to create a satisfying story and maintain consistency. This isn't a rip on him or any of the other creators personally. They all seem like very nice people. I just don't think that they were the right team for the job. I want to go back to where Jose mentioned that they wanted to completely reboot the world, essentially starting anew, because there are quite a few problems with this statement. For starters, if they really wanted to start anew and disconnect themselves from G4, then why the heck do they constantly reference it? I mean, have you seen Sunny's room? There is stuff from G4 all over the place. Which brings me on to my next point. They are too reliant on their relationship with the previous series. Rather than attempting to make this series capable of standing on its own, regardless of whether or not anyone has seen Friendship is Magic, they choose to constantly fill the scenes with callbacks, references, and fan service. Now, I don't have a problem with them doing any of these things. In fact, I think that when done right, they can greatly elevate the enjoyment of a show. But G5 is failing to be anything more than just a reference. It's fully reliant on its association with G4 to carry its success, rather than being something with a well-developed story and characters. I've heard a lot of people say that we shouldn't compare this show to G4 and should instead judge it based on its own merit. And to that I say, 1. The creators clearly intend for us to associate G4 with G5, and are explicitly telling us that all of this takes place in the same universe, essentially making it the same series. So not only do I think that it's fair to compare them, but the creators seem to want us to compare them as well. And 2, even if we judge the show for what it is in an attempt to completely disconnect it from Friendship is Magic, it still doesn't stand on its own for having countless plot holes, lack of character depth, and plot lines that go nowhere. Plus, the fact that it seems as though they are taking this series in a direction that requires you to have actually watched G4 to understand the story. But not only do you have to have seen G4, if you want to fully understand the rest of Make Your Mark, you will have to look to other forms of media to know what all is going on. You want to know how the main 5 ended up living together in Maritime Bay? Or have a better understanding of Sunny's Alicorn magic? Well, you gotta go to YouTube to watch Tell Your Tale. Want to know what happened to Sprout? Better buy a $40 video game to get that story. Wondering how Equestria fell? Go read the comics just to learn that 5 minutes after the series ended, everything went to Tartarus. Curious as to who these ancient heroes were and what life used to be like in ancient Equestria? Well, you're gonna have to go watch an entirely separate series that you may not even enjoy, all just to understand this one. And speaking of that comic series and how this all ties into G4, let's take a look at how Equestria fell for a moment, because it is by far the dumbest thing they could have possibly done with this series. And spoilers for anyone who hasn't read it, although it's not like it really matters if you ask me, because it isn't even worth your time. But if you do care about spoilers, skip to the time on screen. So apparently, according to this comic, the 3 crystals were created by Twilight in order to stop the 3 pony kinds from fighting each other, because a mysterious pony said some racist things and got some ponies to believe that they were superior on the basis that they had magic. Now, anything about this seem familiar to you? This is exactly what happened in the ending of The End. The thing about this story, however, is that rather than teach a lesson about celebrating each other's differences, you know, that thing they were constantly teaching throughout the series, they decided, nope, Twilight is gonna pull Starlight and try to make every pony exactly the same. She and her friends will fail and reunify in Equestria, everything will fall apart, and undermine literally everything they spent 9 seasons building up, just so that we can do the entire thing all over again, but worse. And do know, this is undermining the series. I get the argument that nothing lasts forever and Equestrian world peace would inevitably have to fall, and I agree with that. My point is that it simply cannot fall under Twilight's rule, and certainly not under the watch of the main 6. The show ended by telling us these characters have faced many challenges we don't get to see, and whatever challenges came before them, they were prepared to handle it. The final words of the show are how the magic of friendship grows, literally telling us that friendship will continue to spread across the world. That is, in fact, what the Princess of Friendship does. But now we are being told that instead, not long after the last problem, everything they spent 9 seasons building up to, everything we spent over a decade enjoying, was all for nothing, as it all comes rumbling down immediately after that final episode. If they were going to do this, they should have at least waited until after Twilight's rule for Equestria to fall apart. But nope, we gotta bring back old characters because that's what everyone loves, that's what's marketable, that's what's recognizable, and we aren't confident enough in our own abilities to make characters that stand out on their own enough to keep people engaged. We must instead rely on the previous series to carry our success and destroy it in the process. But nothing that I have mentioned so far even compares to the next point, something that will divide the fandom more than it has ever been and will even cause many people to leave it altogether, and that's politics. Jose Uca stated that the movie didn't have a political agenda, but it did hint at real-life things going on. While I agree that the movie didn't get full-blown political, there were many people who didn't feel that way about it. Even what little there was still too much, and people responded negatively to it. I personally am of the opinion that real-world politics should stay out of movies and shows, even if I agree with the message, unless those movies and shows are explicitly meant to be political in nature. Shows are supposed to be an escape from the real world, something where we can all put our differences aside and come together to enjoy a fun story with fun characters. matters, something to unify around. Politics is important and should be discussed, but there is a time and a place for that, and that time and place is not when we are all just trying to enjoy a show together. If I want to listen to politics, I'll go turn on the news. If I want to unwind and relax, then I turn on a TV show. And I don't know if you've noticed, but politics isn't exactly relaxing. And if they decide to double down on this, it is my fear that it will become a massive discussion point within the fandom. And as all political discussions do, it will just end up making everybody angry. And what makes this worse is that when you take a pre-established IP that already has a following of people with varying political ideologies and bring what is the most controversial topic ever to the foreground for people to discuss, you end up with a fan base that is actively fighting itself. And most of the people who don't agree with the political messaging will end up leaving, causing the fandom to shrink and turn into nothing but a pool of toxicity. As a general rule, show creators should instead focus on non-controversial values and messages that we can all agree on. The classic episodes that you would expect to find in a kid's cartoon. The sharing is caring episode. The how to deal with a bully episode. The lie spiraling out of control episode. Basically, just about any of the messaging we receive from Friendship is Magic. Since so many other people were talking about it, I actually considered making a video on the politics of G5, but then decided, no, because I don't want to contribute to the problem. Which is why I say to you, if you're about to comment something on politics, don't! Instead, comment about bears, or any of the other 20 points I made.
Once upon a time, legends say that long ago there was such a thing called taxes.
Also, if people end up having legitimately interesting conversations in the comments about bears, know that I am 100% joining in the discussion. With all of this in mind, all of the flaws and red flags this show has, we must now answer the question, is there any hope for MLP G5, or is it simply doomed to fail? The answer is, it depends on what exactly you mean by fail. In terms of the story, oh yeah, they are absolutely doomed to fail for multiple reasons, but the biggest would have to be the fact that they have undermined the entirety of G4, which alone can ruin the enjoyment of this show, because even if they somehow manage to make it good overall, you know it's based off the destruction of the one before it, and destroyed it in one of the dumbest ways possible. The only way I could see them coming back from this would be to declare the comics non-canon and start over giving a different answer as to how Equestria fell, but I don't see them doing that anytime soon. However, if by fail you mean it will not have a decent-sized following and sell toys, no, G5 will not fail, because there are some people who will still enjoy the show. There are some people who will enjoy it even more than G4, and even some people who acknowledge the fact that G5 has a ton of problems, but still enjoy watching the show for cute ponies being wholesome and friendly towards each other. And if that's enough for you, you will probably enjoy this show. But for me personally, I need more than just a cute package for the story to come in. I am a huge fan of storytelling, world building, character development, and to see all of that stripped away from MLP is more than a little upsetting. If G5 ends up being good, I am fully willing to acknowledge it as such. But given what they have done thus far, I don't think that there is any way that they can come back from what they have broken other than declaring the entirety of G5 non-canon. But I can't see Hasbro caring enough to do that. Plus, I'm sure some fans of G5 would be pretty disappointed if they did that. But how do you feel about G5? Can you think of any other ways to fix its problems? Will you watch it? Let me know in the comments. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hopefully I didn't ruin it for you. And until next time, this is Starstrike, signing out.